Hi, I'm Paul Fisher. I'm a senior analyst with KuppingerCole, and today I'm joined by Jim Taylor as head of product with the identity management and security with Symantec. Hi, Jim.
Hey Paul, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thanks. Great to have you here this afternoon or this morning, depending on where we are in the world. Um, before we get started with our sort of discussion, um, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about IMS and how it's moved to Symantec and what that means for the larger Symantec portfolio and most importantly, I guess, for your customers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Happy to, Paul. So, great to chat with you again. As you said, lots been going on with us over here at Broadcom. Broadcom obviously been getting into the software business over the last couple of years. A couple of years ago, Broadcom acquired CA, and that's where I come from. I was on the CA side of things, looking after CA's security portfolio. Then about a year ago, we acquired Symantec. And we did that because a couple of different reasons. One, we have a focus on growing our software business at Broadcom, and we see security as being very, very strategic. And it just made so much sense. There's so much synergy for us to, once we acquired Symantec, we now have one of the world's leading security brands and one of the largest cybersecurity businesses, to move all of the identity and access management, the privileged access management, the former security assets of CA into the Symantec business. So, we really did that because it just gives us that, breadth of portfolio. We added a bunch of capabilities, identity and access management to the Symantec portfolio that they didn't have. And we're able to leverage some of the core security capabilities that Symantec already had that we didn't as a standalone identity and access management business. So that's really leading to us being able to focus on some, core industry topics and themes, things like SASE, zero trust, those kinds of things. We're taking a very kind of comprehensive approach to cybersecurity.
Well, I mean, it's exciting times, and it's great to hear that there's this new sort of impetus there for security. And of course, you're right that our customers talk an awful lot about privileged access management. And one thing they have been talking about is another thing you mentioned, zero trust. And for many, zero trust is a lot more than just securing the perimeter. So can you tell us a bit more how Symantec's PAM technologies fit into the zero trust architecture and modeling?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great question, and it's funny, Paul, because I mean, you and I not so young anymore. We've been around a while.
Well,
And zero trust by maybe more me than you, but zero trust by many other names. The concepts and the principles of it have been around forever. But we also see that even though this stuff has been around for a long time, it's really risen in mind share recently, and I think that's to do with things like people migrating to the cloud, more adoption of DevOps technology. The crazy circumstances we've all found ourselves in the last year, this huge shift of working from home. Um,
hmm
but when it comes to PAM, the principles of zero trust have really been driving PAM technologies for years. So we look at it in these three kind of key core tenets or principles, if you like. And so for us, the first principle of zero trust is to really identify every user, every device, strong identity, knowing who is a critical component. And that's obviously a core use case for PAM technologies. One of the core use cases or original use cases for PAM technologies was always that privileged accounts, administrative accounts, DBAs, database admins, root accounts were always traditionally kind of shared. You had all these super powerful accounts, and then organizations would share either internally amongst their admins or externally with contractors, those kinds of things. And so it was very, difficult to manage and secure those. It became nearly impossible to figure out, who'd done what or who performed certain activities. So that's a core use case of PAM. That's directly a core tenet of zero trust. PAM technologies address this with credential vaulting. We require people to authenticate to the PAM system to identify themselves, usually with some stronger form of authentication like two-factor or something like that, before they get access to those shared credentials. The second core tenet for Zero Trust is really to enforce least privilege access. And privilege accounts, generally speaking, things like root accounts, have very wide ranges of entitlements and access and permissions, and so that usually represents a huge risk, because if compromised, a malicious user would have access to steal all sorts of sensitive data or do all sorts of things. So PAM as a system tends to enforce a finer grained access control even over those privileged accounts. So what it does is it limits what activities a user can do, or files or information a user can access, and that's all based on security policy. So PAM really helps you to enforce that whole least privilege concept. And then finally, the third tenet of Zero Trust is always to assume breach. Always to assume it doesn't matter how strong your security is, but just assume a breach regardless, and adopt a security posture based on that. So we already discussed a little bit about how PAM helps in this area with identifying and limiting access, but PAM also provides you an indelible audit trail of all of the activities and the accesses that have taken place. So in the event of a breach or something like that, knowing what's happening or has happened is really critical to being able to mitigate and manage those types of attacks.
Yeah, and that's really important, isn't it? A lot of people often think of PAM as just about access, but actually having a record of who's done what and where they've been is invaluable. So session monitoring and recording is hugely important. I mean, you mentioned breaches, and we tend to in this security world we don't even talk about breaches very much anymore, because like you say, they happen all the time.
Yeah.
But one that did sort of catch the headlines recently, I think just the end of last year, was the SolarWinds attack, and I think that involved unauthorized access to service accounts, which in effect are sort of privilege accounts. So obviously that was a bit of a wake-up call for many organizations, and I was wondering what you would say to those people that are not sleeping at night now, wondering whether they're going to be the next SolarWinds attack or similar. So how can PAM or Symantec help there?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and like we field that question a lot. I think this attack really shocked a lot of people. Certainly made a lot of people think. So for us, specific to PAM technologies, obviously we have much broader security solutions within Symantec. I won't get into that. I'll focus on PAM. There are a couple of key use cases that we really think PAM type technologies can help prevent or mitigate similar attacks to what happened with SolarWinds. So I mean, obviously, first of all, we're in the digital age. Just about every company now has developers. They're all writing applications. There's a proliferation of source code and those kinds of things around, and so that was one of the starting points or kill chain for SolarWinds was some injection into of malicious code into source code. So we really advocate that enterprises really need to look at and think about how they protect their source code. So PAM enables you to enforce very granular access to those systems, where your source code is or that have access to your source code. So that includes things like files, folders, any processes, registries, those kinds of things. We have a file integrity monitoring capability, which is a bit of a mouthful to say, but what it really does is it sits there and it looks at and it monitors all of your source code and your source code files, and it looks to see if anything's accessing it, anything's changing it, anything's tampering with it, and we have the ability to stop that, to prevent that. We can prevent tampering programs from accessing those source codes or those source code files, or we can alert on any kind of interaction with those. So having some preventative controls and a strong security posture around accessing your source code, we see as critical, and that could have potentially stopped the whole situation before it started. But then, if I refer back to what I said about Zero Trust, always assume you're breached. Assuming that you have been breached, that brings up the second use case where we see PAM could help. And so that's for any end user organization that may have inadvertently or unbeknownst to them implemented some kind of malicious source code in their environment. Having those fine-grained access controls in place from something like a PAM solution can really help to mitigate any damage caused by any persistent threats or anything like that. Because obviously, after an attacker gains access, they gain, an administrative privilege. They're usually looking to do things like install a backdoor, a rootkit. They want to start to export sensitive data. Those kinds of things. They're looking around for what they can get their hands on and what damage they can do. Well, with proper access controls implemented, attackers, even if they have gained access to a privileged account, it limits what they're able to do. So you might even be able to prevent them from accessing things like sensitive files or executing malicious commands. You might be able to set up alerting on those kinds of things. So we really advocate that fine-grained controls implemented through a PAM solution really give you not just peace of mind in terms of securability, but also auditability and tracking. So hopefully that helps people sleep a little bit better at night if they take that comprehensive approach to their security posture.
Yeah, and I think that I don't know how SolarWinds, how the malware got in, but it may well have been because of the shift to home working, and we need to secure privilege access from endpoints that previously weren't even protected. But I don't want to talk about that right now. I want to talk about DevOps because that's even hotter than the SolarWinds attack. And we KuppingerCole recently released our PAM for DevOps Leadership Compass, so it's a sort of hot topic for us. And you did very well in that, I'm pleased to say. But I was curious as to how you view the area, how it's going to develop, particularly with Symantec in mind, and how you're seeing your customers deploying PAM for their DevOps.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Paul, and thanks for that. We were super pleased to participate in that, DevOps Compass. I'm very happy with the results that we got. So, as you say, we're seeing an awful lot of PAM customers starting to leverage, the PAM technology in their DevOps environment. So, for us, it's a key area of investment. We're actually planning some very significant projects this year to increase our capabilities in DevOps and around things like secrets management and those kinds of things. But, for us, funnily enough, we're still seeing a lot of customers. There's almost like a sophistication curve or a maturity curve of how people use this technology. Generally speaking, people will buy or acquire a PAM solution to address the shared accounts, the admin accounts, user-based privileging. Then once they've kind of cracked that and solved that, then they'll move to like the next level in the game. They'll start to think about service accounts, system accounts, machine to machine, those kinds of things. Then once they've cracked that, then they start to think about more of their business processes, DevOps, CI/CD integration, those kinds of things. So generally, we don't see people purchasing a PAM solution with the primary use case in mind around DevOps, but we do see that they start to get there. It tends to be an extended use case, and so we're starting to have more and more of those types of conversations. And so it's an area that we're really starting to invest heavily in. So, we're absolutely aligned with you on that. I would say, in addition, over the last year, our focus has really been around bringing together various solutions and use cases within the PAM space. As you know, we have the traditional PAM server control host-based type solution. We also have the newer kind of PAM password vaulting type solution. So we've really been working to bring those two solutions together into a single capability. And that kind of goes a little bit to the DevOps question, in that we're starting to see people really starting to get to grips with and understand the value of that PAM technology can bring, not just ours, but PAM technology in general, and start to leverage it for other use cases. They want to be able to do host-based controls. They want to be able to do fine-grained controls on host base. They want to be able to do password vaulting. They want to be able to do that in a single solution. So you're seeing a lot of the PAM vendors start to extend and move into adjacencies around use cases like DevOps, secrets management, integration with CI/CD, a lot more API integration, and so we see the same, and that's a key critical area of investment for us over the next 12 months.
Do you, you kind of mentioned it there, but do you think that people or an organization might buy a PAM solution just for DevOps, or is it more likely they already have a PAM in place? I know it's a big question for a very frank, differentiated market, but
so honestly, right now, I would say I don't. Not at this point. I don't think that would be the only reason that an organization would buy a PAM solution. I think it may be another reason or an additional reason. I think people, once they start to get to grips with the technology, they start to find ways that they can leverage that technology across other use cases. So we may evolve to that over time, as the technology and customers and usage of that technology evolves over time. We may get there, but right now I would be surprised if somebody bought and put in a PAM solution just specifically for or only for a set of DevOps use cases. I think they're more likely to buy that technology platform for a broader set of use cases and then also leverage it for DevOps capabilities.
Yeah. Great. I think it was 2018 that GDPR finally came into being in Europe, and now there's PSD2. There's also the California privacy laws and one in New York, I believe. And data privacy is obviously very much on everyone's minds, and it is an important subject. But probably a lot of people don't necessarily think of data governance solutions and IT, GRC, etc. They don't always think of PAM as one way of meeting these compliance rules. So perhaps you could tell us a bit more how that would help.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's it's an interesting topic, right? I mean, and the one thing we know about data privacy and regulation is there's never going to be less of it. There's always, you can always count on there being more. We also see that there's more. Governments are now kind of getting to the point where there's more consequences around those types of things. You're getting more kind of fines and that kind of stuff going on around that. So. Generally speaking, the way we look at regulation is I like to break it down into there's more or less basically two different types of requirement. The first one is accountability. Can an organization really control access to or manage access to systems or data or processes that have regulated information, like for example PII. So that's one key area. The second key area for us is around things like attestation and certification. As you mentioned, there's a lot of data governance tools, those kinds of things. Symantec, we're a big DLP vendor. We have a lot of those capabilities as well. But organizations really need to be able to accurately report on who's accessed those systems, who can access that data, how are they managing and governing those entitlements to really ensure that least privilege is being enforced. So, what we see PAM offering in this space, where we see, PAM giving capabilities is, obviously we talked a little bit about, the access controls and fine-grained access that PAM can do. That obviously, certainly helps. And by default, good security tools like PAM deny access to users, and through policy you allow access. So there's an inherent base of security. You take that and combine it with the monitoring and the auditing capabilities that an auditor who's enforcing a regulation might want to see. And generally speaking, regardless of the regulation, showing that you have good security controls in place, being able to prove that through things like auditing, and showing that to your auditors, and then finally, integrating with other security solutions like, IGA solutions, governance solutions, which, by the way, we do. We offer those capabilities, but we also very much believe in customer choice. So we integrate with market-leading solutions like SailPoint out of the box to give you that certification and attestation. That overall approach tends to help satisfy a lot of regulatory requirements.
Okay, well, thanks very much. That's some great information there. Maybe we could just finish with a bit of sort of crystal ball gazing,
Sure.
and where you think PAM is going maybe in the next 2 or 3 years in terms of product development.
Yeah, no, sure, absolutely. So I think it's a very interesting time for PAM. Some of these basic concepts or basic use cases have been around for a long time, but I'm starting to feel like the industry as a whole has kind of cracked those base use cases and those base capabilities. And so now PAM is starting to evolve, and it's starting to move into adjacencies, which is always a very interesting time in a technology's life cycle. So just as you brought up and rightly mentioned, Paul, we see things like DevOps, secrets management, broader integration of PAM into the wider security ecosystem, machine integrations. We see a lot of our customers have kind of, moved past that first stage of securing users and admins, and are now looking at things like service accounts, machine to machine. Banks want to secure, ATMs or cash points access into their financial network. So we really see that PAM has a great set of core security capabilities, and it's going to expand and move into adjacencies. So I think DevOps is key and critical, but I also think service accounts and non-human or non-machine things are going to be big in the PAM space, and just general overall integration into the CI/CD and the digital ecosystem, if you like. It's an exciting time.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And even we've sent out the invitations for Leadership Couplers 2021, and we've got just as many as last year. But that allows for a fact that a couple of companies have been acquired. So it's a really dynamic area at the moment. So I'm really happy that I'm covering it. So Jim Taylor, thank you very much for answering the questions this afternoon. And with that, I'll say goodbye.
Thanks, Paul. Great chatting with you again.